Looking for a story, huh? Well, you've come to the right place. You probably already know that a good story will have a plot. That's the series of events that take a story from the beginning to the end. In this story, we'll follow feisty Grandma Irma through the 5 main parts of a plot: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution.
Woo! I can still get around pretty good for my age, huh?
Not bad, Grandma Irma, but let's start you back at the beginning of the story, sometimes called the exposition. The exposition is the part of the story that introduces the characters, setting, and any other information necessary to understand the story. The exposition to our story is that Grandma Irma has entered a checkers tournament at the rec center.
All right, who wants a piece of me? I'm the checkers queen.
See, told you she was feisty. After the exposition, the rising action starts. Slide Grandma Irma along the plot diagram to see what happens next. The rising action sets a story in motion. Usually it begins with the introduction of a major conflict. A conflict is a problem with which the main character struggles. One of the types of conflict is external conflict. This is a struggle between a character and some outside force. Some of the types of external conflicts are character versus character, character versus nature, and character versus society. In our story, the action starts to rise when Grandma Irma faces her opponent for the Rec Center Checkers Championship. This is the major conflict, or the biggest challenge the character faces.
All right, youngster, show me what you got.
So, what type of conflict is the major conflict in this story? As the story continues, the rising action adds tension to the major problem. Let's see what Grandma Irma's next challenge will be. Sometimes the rising action will add minor conflicts that complicate the major conflict. In other words, new events get added that make the major conflict harder to resolve. During the championship checkers match, people gather around and start talking about how Grandma Irma might be too old to come out victorious.
Young hotshots think I'm too old to win, huh? Well, I've got some tricks up my sleeve.
This is a minor external conflict where Grandma Irma has to fight to prove everyone wrong. What type of conflict is this minor conflict? The tension is building. Is Grandma Irma up to the test? Let's see what she faces next. A huge storm passes by the rec center, and the thunder rattles the checkerboard.
Good golly, this racket and this shaking is making it hard to concentrate.
So, the storm adds another minor external conflict to the plot. Grandma Irma is having a hard time concentrating. What type of conflict is this minor conflict? The major conflict is getting more and more complicated. Is Grandma Irma going to win the championship? Another type of conflict in a story is internal conflict. This is a struggle that occurs within the mind of a character, like making a decision or overcoming an emotion. In this case, one more minor conflict is added to the story. Grandma Irma is at an important point in the match, and she has to decide what move to make.
Do I triple jump him? Or do I protect my king?
This type of internal conflict is also sometimes called character versus him or herself. Who knew a championship checkers match could be so nerve-wracking?
I did. Play hard or go home, Sonny.
All of this rising action has led to the climax, the deciding moment of the major conflict. The climax of a story is the turning point. It's the moment of greatest tension, suspense, or emotion. Here in the Checkers Championship, Grandma Irma has made her move, and now she and the entire crowd are waiting to see whether it was the right move.
Here it is, folks, the moment of truth.
This is the climax because whatever happens after this will probably solve the major conflict, one way or the other. After the climax comes the falling action of the story, the events that lead to solving or lessening the conflicts. Let's find out which way this story is going to go. And the match is over. Grandma Irma's opponent has lost all of his checkers.
Oh, yeah! Great game, Sonny. You really gave me a run for my money.
Finally, we've come to the end of our story. After the falling action comes the resolution. This is the final outcome of the story, during which any remaining problems are solved and the story ends. In our story, Grandma Irma has won the checkers championship, overcoming other people's views of her, a storm, and her own self-doubt. The major conflict has been resolved, and so have all the minor conflicts.
Go, Irma! It's your birthday! You're a champion! Now, where's that trophy?
Spunky little gal, isn't she? In this story, all of the conflicts have been resolved. Sometimes an author will choose to not resolve one or more of the conflicts. When this happens, the author might want you to think about why the conflicts weren't resolved. There might be a message there.
I have an idea. Maybe we need a little more practice going through a story and looking at plot and conflicts. This is a science fiction story called Strange Creatures. It's set in the future and is based on another great story called Youth by Isaac Asimov. Let's keep track of some of the story events as we go along.
Choose the details that describe the exposition of this story.
Woo! That's what I'm talking about. Now we have some action in the story. The major conflict has been introduced.
Which of these statements best describes the major conflict in the story?
So what type of conflict is the major conflict in this story?
I think the major conflict is going to get worse from here. Let's check it out.
Ooh, in his section, we find out that Lanky's dad has come to the country to investigate an alien landing. Let's add that to our rising action.
Okay, but I don't get what that has to do with the major conflict. Cyan and Lanky keeping two strange creatures in a cage.
Quite a puzzler, huh? Let's take a closer look at the rising action and see if there are any minor conflicts added to the story. The rising action adds a minor conflict to the story. Cyan and Lanky's planet is almost out of water. What type of conflict is this?
Rising action also adds another minor conflict to the story. Many people, like Cyan's father, think that aliens need to be eliminated. What type of conflict is this?
So I see how these minor conflicts add tension to the story, but I still don't get how they tie into the major conflict. Interesting. Let's keep reading and see if you're right.
Ooh-wee! We're at the climax of the story. But before that, there is one more minor conflict that adds suspense to the rising action.
What new minor conflict is introduced in this part of the story?
Here it is. All of the rising action has built up to this intense moment in the story.
You two just love being corny, don't you? What is the climax of the story? The climax, hopefully the following action will start to show how all of these conflicts are going to be solved. Besides finding out that the strange creatures are the aliens, this section of the story introduced some falling action.
Which event in the falling action shows that the major conflict is close to being solved?
Nice. Let's find out how this story is resolved. I wonder if Cyan and Lanky are going to keep the aliens.
What a wallaby wallop of a surprise ending!
No kidding. We find out that the aliens are actually humans.
And the main characters, Cyan and Lanky, are what we would think of as strange.
Choose the details that describe the resolution of this story.
Remember that the resolution will usually solve all of the remaining conflicts, but sometimes an author will choose to leave conflicts unresolved.
Click on all of the conflicts from the story that are definitely solved in the resolution.
Yep, this was a minor character versus themselves conflict. It was solved because Cyan and Linky don't have to worry about what to do with the creatures anymore. They leave, and Cyan even changes his mind about them.
I wonder why the author chose not to resolve two of the minor conflicts.
Well, hun, I think the fact that Cyan and Lanky's planet is still almost out of water teaches us a lesson. We should be more careful with our resources, or we might end up like them in the future.